Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm glad to see that many people came. Bit of housekeeping. Let's make sure all the phones are on silent. I personally don't like all the beeps and the rings during presentations. The toilets are right here on the side. And let's make sure we're present. Without being too hippie, I would like to suggest we take a deep breath, make sure we're well grounded, and make sure we're not running adrenaline and dopamine. All right. So picture this. Picture a community built for a sustainable future where people live lightly on Earth, where a place where people support one another, where it's a place that makes it easy to foster meaningful connections. That's our vision at Afterlee Ecovillage, and that's why we're here today. But before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, the Gullible people. We pay deep respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and their relationship with nature and the way they live harmoniously with the land inspired many of our values at the Afterlee Ecovillage. Allow me to present myself. My name is Cyprien Clerc. I'm originally from France, hence the name and the accent. I've been on the board of the Afterlee Ecovillage since its formation, and I'm also host of the Future Seeds podcast, in which I explore solutions to the world's problems, a vision that aligns deeply with what we'll be showcasing today. Today is the first of 3 information sessions, and each information session will feature a short interview on a different topic each time, followed by deep dive into the project's details, and then a Q&A. Today's session is focused on the land. We'll be talking about topics like agroforestry, regenerative agriculture, permaculture, and the great opportunity that an eco-village is to nurture both the people and the land. I'm joined by 2 remarkable human beings, Banya Halas here and Shane Silverspring. Banya is a valued member of our community, but he's also a designer, educator, gardening mentor working at the intersection of permaculture, regenerative agroecology, and successional agroforestry. He supports individuals and communities to grow food, fuel, and fiber through ecological regenerative systems, and his work fosters knowledge sharing through courses and traineeships. And Shane, over there, is the founder of 2 ecovillages, including Afterlee Ecovillage. He's the planning director of Planning Regenerative Communities Pty Ltd, and he brings 13 years of experience in strategic planning, which has been very helpful. I have the privilege of interviewing Banya here today for a short time, and we'll be exploring these topics such as agroforestry, land care, and how these approaches can help create resilient systems. After that, Shane will present all the details about the project through 3 key aspects: the 4 areas of regeneration in eco-village design, so social, cultural, economic, and ecological, and how we're integrating these into the Afterlee Ecovillage. And he'll share our vision, values, the details about the land and the infrastructure, and what it is the opportunity that we're offering. Hopefully, at the end of the session, you'll feel inspired about the insight we shared, and you'll feel that you have a clear understanding of what the project is and how you can play an active role in it. Your presence here matters. I believe that every time we take time to discuss these topics, we're helping shape a better future. So thank you all for being here, and let's start. You ready, Banya? So thank you for joining us today.
Before you start, can I just get you to big voice down the back here?
Sure, we'll raise our voice because we have no amplification for this, and we'll do a clap for the camera. Yes. All right. Can you hear us if we speak like this? Can you hear us?
Yeah.
In the back? Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. So thank you for joining us today. Can you tell us a bit about your background and what inspired you to get into permaculture and regenerative agriculture?
Well, I grew up in Hawkesbury, the sort of older agricultural area west of Sydney, and at that stage, a lot of that area was being carved up from commercial farms into sort of, I guess, smaller holdings and hobby farms, and there was a lot of regeneration of the natural environment post grazing and post more intensive agriculture. So I sort of got the chance growing up as a child living in a sort of small regenerating forest, and did manage small livestock and poultry and grew fruit and veggies there and things. So I kind of had in many ways an upbringing quite close to nature and food growing, not in a commercial sense, but in a sense of doing it in a sense of part of a regenerating ecosystem, that the land was sort of growing richer and more diverse and more productive from our time there, from a quite degraded ecosystem. So in some sense, with my family growing up, I was a part of this sort of, a form of land regeneration and living within that as a part of that. At some stage in my schooling, I got exposed to ideas around permaculture through books and teachers in agriculture at school, and when I kind of felt like I was leaving school and needed to create some sort of a valuable path in the world, the only thing I really kind of wanted to do was actually landscape architecture in a way that integrated food into where people lived. It's very inspired by some of the ideas around permaculture, which to me at the time were very much ideas. I hadn't experienced a lot of that in the flesh. And that kind of has taken me in a few directions to being involved a lot in the last couple of decades in community gardens, which has been a great forum of people coming together and sharing experience, sharing plant materials, sharing plant knowledge, how to grow, how to cook different plants. And particularly through that space, I've sort of learnt a lot around different cultural plants I didn't grow up with. I grew up south of here with a more kind of maybe more conventional European diet, and since I moved to the subtropics and been living here the last sort of 20 years, I've learnt so much from islander communities, African people, South Americans, on just so many amazing food crops that grow really well in this area that I wasn't exposed to and aren't necessarily in the sort of mainstream food distribution systems, because it's not part of that kind of Eurocentric kind of core of
Maybe let's define those terms a bit. Can you still hear us at the back? Is it fine? Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe for those who don't know about these concepts, can we maybe explain permaculture, what's different from conventional agriculture?
So I mean, I guess permaculture sort of derived from an idea of a sense of permanent culture or permanent agriculture, with a recognition from sort of the 1970s or so that a lot of the mainstream industrial agriculture was very much moving away from having any sense of sustainability, that was continually degrading a lot of the ecosystem in a lot of situations. So it was sort of part of a movement to look at how can we shift that agriculture to a sense that's regenerating degraded land rather than continuing to degrade land further. And when I share that, I say that not with any disrespect to farmers or any growers, because it's the economic pressures that often clamp down on growers and often force a lot of growers staying financially viable to do degrading, impacts on the soil and on the land, which can happen over time, slowly but surely, in a lot of situations. So permaculture is sort of a sense of trying to, in terms of bringing a sense of permanence back to a culture that's actually degrading, moving into a regenerative practice.
Yeah, and you also work with syntropic agriculture and regenerative agroecology. Maybe could you explain these practices as well?
Yeah, lots of terms, I guess, but so I very much like the term regenerative agriculture, the sense that I guess there's awareness these days with agriculture that a lot of practices are degrading on soil carbon, on ecosystem services, on biodiversity. So the idea of regenerative agriculture is to be rebuilding those, to be rebuilding ecosystem services in terms of water infiltration into the soil, so that flash flood impacts are less of an issue because there's less runoff and more infiltration and a slower movement of water table water through the landscape. Certainly biodiversity can have a huge impact on the health of agricultural ecosystems, just having areas that rebuild biodiversity and protect soil from erosion and compaction and so on. What was the term? Regenerative? What was the term we're asking about? Regenerative
syntropic
agroforestry or
agriculture and regenerative agroecology.
Yeah, so and agroecology to me is a way of looking at what is an ecological approach to agriculture. Agriculture, we're working with ecosystems and to one degree or another, creating food production to service human cultures and economies and working with that ecosystem in a way that either degrades it or rebuilds it. So agroecology to me is about understanding farming and land management as taking a role in that ecosystem. And sometimes it can have agriculture can, because of economic paradigms, have a very different approach of like, how can we extract resources from this soil, rather than how are we engaging with this ecosystem to support its function. So for me, agroecology that has a regenerative focus is a way of being with the land that's consciously trying to rebuild that soil and rebuild that ecosystem. And in terms of syntropic farming, syntropic agroforestry, that's something I've been exposed to for about the last 7 or 8 years, and it's a form of agroforestry working with trees and food production, particularly coming from the tropical areas of South America and with a big focus in Brazil. And a really interesting movement of tree-based agriculture that's been doing a really incredible job of regenerating areas in that part of the world. So I've been amongst a number of different growers in the last 5 to 10 years, I guess, in the region, more on the coast than here, that have been exploring techniques of doing that as a market gardener, where I have primary production as the main work that I do, but integrating into that system long-term trees that have ecological benefits far greater than just a continual annual cycle of cultivation and disturbance and fast annual cropping.
Feels like there's quite a bit of nature science in there, and which
Yeah.
I'm not very familiar to. I'm very happy to hear about. But can you give us a bit of an insight of how all these approaches come to life in the context of an eco-village?
The really wonderful thing, I think, in the Australian economic paradigm, particularly around what an eco-village offers, is having worked about 10 years of my life, I suppose, as a primary producer, mostly as a intensive market gardener or orchardist and intensive horticulture, is that the huge amount of work for the decreasing returns in that field it's a really challenging thing to be in, especially if you don't own land and especially if you're not living on the land. So I've done most of that, renting land in my life, which is really, really difficult. I'm really excited about the idea of being able to live in a space where I can have those enterprises where I live, and so on hot days like this, I'm not like going to work, working through the heat of the day, coming back home. I can actually work my life around it, work really early mornings, work really late nights, have a bit of downtime in the heat of the day to do other things at home. And there's living in a space that is a agricultural industry and ecosystem allows, from my perspective, a much more enjoyable and productive way of working with that land than what I currently experience. So that's something I'm really excited about. Having more people, like regenerating landscapes takes a lot of energy, and the economy is not very good at valuing that at this stage. So, there's early work in soil carbon and trying to look at systems to reward farmers for ecosystem services and biodiversity and that sort of thing. But most of that work happens in our economy by government grants and people volunteering their time and energy just for the love of doing that. And that's really hard to do in a commercial farm, but in a space where people live and they're also nurturing a home environment for their family and their community, that energy is much easier to give to that space than to a piece of farmland that you're not necessarily engaging with as your home all the time, and maybe for a few people there to appreciate. So there's a really great synergy from my experience of working with communities that are focused on agriculture, that people living within that system, providing experiences for their children, that's beautiful, and connecting with nature and their food, offers us a form of energy that's not just a economic input-output, that actually allows that process to happen in a way that actually helps it to flourish and to give it greater ecological diversity and a whole bunch of higher level kind of ecosystem functions than is actually you're able to do on a really shrewd, economically efficient farm. So having people on the land just can really help to nurture
On
that
that
process.
note, what opportunity does Afterlee provide to experiment or demonstrate these approaches?
Yeah, so I guess at this stage, as the cooperative, we're very supportive and open to ideas of community members and future community members being able to run small enterprises in there, whether that's like bees or small grazing enterprises or leasing areas of land for orchards or annual food production. So I think that's a really amazing opportunity to be able to do that within a living space. So one of the, Shane might talk a bit more later about the design of the space, but it's been something we've been co-designing over the last couple of years as we're spending time on the land. But one of the decisions we made really early, which I thought was a really profound and awesome thing, was that we talked about where would our more intensive residential areas go. And it was easy to choose flat, beautiful, open sites that had a really good outlook and were really easy to build on. But we really consciously decided that's actually also the best sites for growing food. And that's sort of been one of the big contradictions of a lot of human cultures, is that they start where food grows really well and then develop all the best food growing land into a town and then start to farm marginal areas in a really poor and degrading way to try and feed the town that's just swamped the best food growing areas. So we made some pretty conscious decisions to actually put our residential areas on some of the slopier land and some of the more marginal land, still with good solar access for good places to live, but actually protecting some of the flatter and better soil for these opportunities. So at the moment, you know, there's a number of people involved with the community that are definitely interested in growing. We've got a couple that have got quite a bit of experience in broader acre cropping and a lot of different growers that are interested in fruit production and vegetable production. It'd be really great to have some people involved in the community that have got a real interest in small livestock production. You know, the land currently has is adjusted to beef cattle, and there's quite a bit of area that can be utilised for beef cattle. Some of that's going to be fenced off and used for residences, but there's definitely opportunities for livestock, and I think there's definitely opportunities for bees, and in future even, you know, timber management on the property.
And there's a whole housing cluster that we actually named the farming cluster.
Yep. So around the existing farmhouse where there is sheds and infrastructure, we would like to be, with the funds that we're developing as a community through this, we'd like to be able to, through the microgrid and power on site and through creating some structures, we'd like to be able to value add food production there, because I sort of know from being a grower that just selling fresh fruit in a precarious market's a pretty challenging thing, but when you can value add products and have the infrastructure to be able to do that, to dry and value add. So we'd like to look at supporting growers with that sort of infrastructure as well.
It's exciting.
Yeah.
Okay, a bit more of a tricky question. How do we plan to work with native plants and animals at Afterlee? What strategies will we use to protect and encourage the local biodiversity?
Right, so at the moment, the property is somewhere around 700 acres, and about 200 acres of that's cleared and has been grazed for quite a while. So that's like 500 odd acres of forest, which I think most or nearly all of which is under a sort of logging agreement and has been logged consistently through that time. We're in a process of firstly starting on all the riparian zones, any of the areas close to waterways and springs, and protecting those as conservation zones, and doing some weed management, really just starting some weed management because we don't have much time on ground at the moment, but starting to look at lantana and some of the more invasive weed issues there that are, you know, threatening that biodiversity. But locking aside more areas than the land has previously, some of the more vulnerable areas, to allow regeneration of the biodiversity, and coming up with a logging plan for future timber resources from that area. And a lot of the areas where we do have riparian zones and springs that aren't currently vegetated, we've sort of got Shane might share in the master plan, but we've got quite a few areas planned to be regenerating those areas, fencing them off from cattle in those vulnerable areas where there's waterways and areas that we want to bring back.
And we have a vegetation management plan,
Yeah.
which is now online on our website if you
Yeah.
want to read it.
Yeah, so it's been put together with a lot of, on the different soils and aspects and different nuances of native communities. So we've got some pretty good information around those, and we've got lots to learn about that environment because most of us haven't lived here. A lot of us have lived on the coast and other areas of the country, but we've had some good support and input around that. And with a lot of us living in northern rivers, maybe more between Lismore and the coast, we've got some familiarity with some of the parts of the landscape here. But yeah, we've got a good foundation in that vegetation management plan to be able to move forward with repairing some of those areas that have been overgrazed and underforested. Yeah, for their best.
Yeah, there's a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
And many communities struggle to find that balance between ecological priorities with practicability and scalability. How do you see us overcoming this challenge?
That's a really good question because, I mean, I have been involved with a number of communities that have been established since either the late 70s, 80s or 90s and sort of seeing how their progression has been. It's kind of interesting establishing something like this now, which I think economically compared to the time some of these older communities have been set up, there's kind of a lot more challenges in life and a bit less free time than some of the people I know that have set up communities. That's what I feel in my life. I know a lot of the community members have. So it is a pretty big challenge how to keep putting energy into land when we're in a process of doing initial establishment of roads and building basic infrastructure and people housing families and a lot of the time and economic pressures. I think it's huge, and I really think the best outcome we have is providing enterprising incentives for community members to be a part of doing that.
I agree.
And so, for instance, some of the areas of repairing land and doing revegetation on waterways, we've got a few community members that part of their work and industry is actually creating essential oils and products from essential oils and actually having within those plantings areas that can be sustainably harvested for economic return as well, rather than just the maybe more conventional bush regen approach of sort of plant it and lock it up, actually having areas we can continue to engage with and having the priority of being ecological restoration, but integrating economic opportunities within that to enable that energy to keep on being put in to maintain it. And I personally think that's one of the best outcomes for a lot of our areas. Yeah.
All right. What's our vision for the future? So looking ahead, what's the vision for Afterlee to maybe become a model for integrating regenerative agriculture into sustainable community living? How do you make it a place that nurtures the people and the land at the same time?
Yeah, that's a good question too. I think one of the really valuable things that we could achieve as a community that'd be quite simple in a way is in a way making ourselves more resilient with fresh food grown on site. And I think this region has obviously great industry in sort of, beef and some broadacre cropping and timber, but I think growing, fresh vegetables and fruit is something that's much easier to do closer to your home than bigger broadacre systems and in-home systems. And I'd like to think that we can scale up some of those areas. We can be able to grow food that we can also help to outreach as an industry to the local community to add to the offers that are on offer here for fresh food and local food. And in terms of our focuses and what we can achieve, I think a big focus we've already had so far is looking at protecting waterways really as a number one. Looking at all of our waters and regenerating those areas where the waters are, really allowing those.
We have a dam, 2 dams.
Yeah, more than 2 dams. I think there's at least 3.
Yeah, 3. That's right.
Yeah, a number of springs and a number of waterways, including a border on Coppercorn Creek. Rejuvenating those areas and integrating food production closer to those waterways feels like a really good starting point. As to how that all unfolds, it's like I don't have an answer
All
for
right.
that.
Leave it to the future.
Yeah.
So we come to my last question.
Yeah.
A bit more into like expansion into the world. So how do you imagine that the knowledge and systems developed in Afterlee could maybe influence or benefit other communities, both locally and further?
Yeah, that's a really good question, I suppose. I mean, I, you know, I don't have a long history. I've never lived in Kyogle. I've lived in the Byron Shire and Lismore Shire, around that area for 15 years, but don't know this side of the Northern Rivers as well. So I've got lots to learn about being here and what's actually going on. But from my experience of working with quite diverse agroforestry systems, I feel like there are a lot of food crops that are capable to be grown in the area that just aren't a foundation of the current cultural food choices. And I think that moving forward into the future with resilience in the face of, economic changes, climate change, so many different challenges that we're facing, I think experimenting and working with agricultural crops that haven't been brought into a lot of areas in the past or don't have a big mainstream presence is a really valuable thing to be doing. Like, for instance, similar climates to this in many places of the world. I've spent time in South America and Southeast Asia and Pacific, a lot of other areas that have very similar climate to here. There's just a huge range of food crops that aren't a part of our, modern conventional food culture here that grow really, really well and are very resilient, that require, they're very resilient to changes in climates, particularly perennial food crops. So for me personally, my work I've been doing with those in the last sort of 20 years on the coast and in other parts of the world, I feel like there's an opportunity to explore some of those food crops in this area, and got lots to learn around the nuances of the climate here and soil. But I think bringing in a more diverse range of food crops than currently exists in the mainstream culture has the potential in the long term to have a really valuable contribution to what's possible in the
Definitely
area.
great terrain for experimentation.
Yeah.
Thank you so much
Thanks, Sue.
for all of those answers. I've learned a lot during this. If you will give him a round of applause for all his answer. And you'll have the opportunity to ask him questions about this at the end when we do the Q&A. And we're now going to switch to Shane presenting the details of the project.
Hey everyone. I'm just going to run through a little bit about the project, which is probably the main reason you're here today. But it's great to have, we've got an amazing group of members so far, and Banya, all the people here are members. So it's like, it's a really exciting group of people coming together to create this village. And as future members, you will also have that input into what this is. So Afterlee Ecovillage, who here kind of knows what they think an ecovillage is? Okay. A few people, cool. So my background is I'm a town planner. So I worked in government for quite a few years. And I've also come from a background of, what would you call it, alternative, let's put it that way. My mother dragged me up here in the Northern Rivers when I was 13, and we headed back to Melbourne soon later. But so I've had a lot of exposure to a lot of different environments, and including Indigenous. I spent some time with the Indigenous people in Papua New Guinea and in some of the Pacific Islands. So I'm very interested, always been interested in human culture and eco-villages, like communities basically. And so from a young age, been living in communities. And I've lived in quite a few different communities around Australia and the world. And I one day got sick of my government job and was researching, community is my thing. What can I do to deepen my understanding in this? And luckily, Findhorn Ecovillage was offering a beautiful course to deep dive on what is Ecovillage and Ecovillage design. So I packed my bags and off I went. And entered the world of the Global Ecovillage Network. So they have, and I guess they have a definition of what an ecovillage is. And it's probably the best one around. And it's one of the issues that we have in Australia. Any developer can call their development an ecovillage, and there's no cross checks, you know, there's no standard, if that makes sense. So this is the closest thing I've seen to a standard if you around the world. But the Ecovillage Network, I'll just quickly give you a bit of background on it, is a very loose grassroots organization. And one of the failings of the Ecovillage Network is that it is people like myself, volunteers, that we're a bit disorganized, we're a bit doing other things, and unfortunately don't have the sort of recognition and funding that I think an organization like this should have. But the network is basically a collection of ecovillages from around the world. And these ecovillages, so the Gen defines the ecovillage as 3 different things. So you've got intentional ecovillages. So intentional ecovillages are where a group of people come together for an intention and create a village or a community. So that's their first definition of what an ecovillage can be. And Findhorn is a great example of this in Scotland. One close to home, Darmanunda, down in the Channon, you know, is a good example of an intentional community, come together for a purpose. So in Australia, we have actually hundreds of communities, but it's very not well known, and it's very disorganized, and because of the nature of them, a lot of them don't want to be found out or promote themselves either. So it's a huge movement here in Australia that most people on the surface wouldn't know exists here in Australia. But it has huge influence. You know, Byron Bay became what it is because of communities. Artists could come up, buy cheap shares in communities and do their art and do their things on cheap way, and that's the way that Byron flourished. So the other definition that the Gen actually brought in, which is very interesting, is traditional villages. And you know, I've seen this when I've lived in different Indigenous communities. They are basically eco-villages. And one of the work I love with the Global Ecovillage Network is that it's one of the few organizations that actually is trying to discourage globalization in one way. Because what it's saying to these communities is you are an eco-village, but going into the future, you need to make sure you keep your cultural values, keep all those things, because they're the elements of an eco-village, but at the same time adopt the new technologies coming in, rather than this sort of monoculture. You know, we talk about monoculture in agriculture, but we're actually experiencing a monoculture of culture around the world. And so the eco-village is really about promoting the biodiversity of culture. And that's why I love the eco-village movement. It's about trying to create little pockets of more biodiverse culture rather than it just becoming a big monoculture, which of course in nature is more resilient. So as you saw with COVID, when you create a monoculture, things can go bad very quickly. So in Australia, we don't have the same, Indigenous people here in Australia didn't have the village culture as much as other Indigenous communities, but there is sort of more, you know, colonial Indigenous communities now. So that's probably the closest example we have to traditional villages here in Australia. That's one in Arnhem Land. I've recently worked with one in far north Queensland, and it's quite interesting because although they're Indigenous community, they have exactly the same issues as intentional communities. And then you've got the urban eco-villages, and that's a growing movement in cities where people don't want to leave that city environment, but they still want that sense of community. So they're creating these urban eco-villages. And a good example here in Australia is in Melbourne, there's a co-housing, Murrindaka, and that's probably a good example here in Australia of a co-housing in a city environment. So we don't, overseas there's a huge growing movement of these co-housing communities. It's very small here in Australia. So the Ecovillage network says an ecovillage has three elements to it. It uses a local participatory process. And what it means by that is it's not run by one person. And so it's an ecovillage that doesn't involve the members is not really an ecovillage, is what they're saying. If it's like, this is how it works, someone saying this is how it works and this is, the way it is not a proper ecovillage. They also have a holistic perspective, which is integrating the dimensions of what they call, the areas of regeneration. And I'll quickly jump on those in a sec. And they also aim to actively regenerate social and natural environments. So if an eco-village comes in and actually degrades the environment or actually doesn't integrate with the social, for instance, if we came in and we don't work with the greater Kyogle community, it's not really an eco-village. So that's the three definitions Jen has on what an eco-village is. So me being one of the founders of Afterlee, I've been inspired by a whole lot of eco-villages, so that's fed into some of Afterlee, if that makes sense. So the inspiration of a lot of eco-villages around Australia, but also the world, has gone into the thinking of Afterlee. And we've already, over the last couple of years, we've already engaged some of the elders and people from the Australian communities to come to Afterlee and talk to members. And so we're definitely trying to learn. It's not like we think we're the first ones. The community movement is well and truly alive in the world, and let's learn from the mistakes, rather than thinking we're the only ones doing this and we know the right way. It's like, let's just try to learn from the others before we go ahead. So, Jen talks about the areas of regeneration, and what they say is that all these areas are as important as each other. And what I noticed in my travels is that eco-villages in Europe, for instance, really focus on the social and maybe the economic aspects, but not so much the ecological aspect. They're like, wow, solar panel, as like it's the newest thing in the world. Whereas here in Australia, we've lived with solar panels since the 1970s. So it's like, oh yeah, of course, Whereas for them, Europeans especially, they come from a village culture more. And so for them, it's not a big step to create that extra level of community. Whereas in Australia, it's a little bit of an extra step. So often Australian communities are very good in the ecological sphere, but not so good in the social cultural. But what the Ecovillage network talks about is all these things are just as important as each other, and if you don't think of all these aspects and things you're doing, then it's not going to be as successful. And I always talk about activities, like the golden activities an Ecovillage can do, is something that incorporates all four of these in the one activity. And one of them, and just a little highlight, some of the best eco-villages in the world I've seen, they also have an outside focus. Like they do some act of service in the greater community, and that unites the village and gives purpose, and also incorporates all these four things in one go. So very quick snapshot of what is an eco-village, and that's the sort of, they have like different 6 different things under each area of regeneration, so that's quite in depth. But that I won't go into them. But just to show you that it's and this came from communities, So the Ecovillage movement, that Ecovillage network, was developed by all the founders of all these large eco-villages coming together and go, including some from Australia. They flew over and like, what makes ours work? What? And others don't, and they came together and formed this principles and things. So this is some of the background of my background that's helped shape Afterlee. So for me, the eco-village movement is like literally I'm so passionate about it because in this age, I feel like joining like an eco-village or creating an eco-village or being part of an eco-village is probably one of the biggest acts of, what would you call it? Social activist kind of act you could do. Because we're in a world where further and further capitalism is trying to separate us further and further from the family unit and the community unit. And it's also destroying the environment. There's a whole lot of other issues. And the eco-village movement has not all the answers, and it's not for everyone, but it has a lot of the solutions for this. And there's a whole lot of other areas, of course, in society where but the eco-village movement has a part to play, I feel, in moving to the future where we solve a lot of the issues that are happening in the world. And what I found in eco-villages is that they're hubs of, like what Banya was saying, let's try some different crops here or whatever. It allows that freedom to innovate, where maybe if you're just an individual on a farm, you wouldn't feel you had that freedom. So they're also little laboratories of what can we do for the future. So I see them as a really important role in going forward as how can we integrate our, still have those luxuries, if you want to call it, of life, but less impact and not destroy that family and community cohesion. So yeah, I really see that they do have a role in this. So basically, I stole a lot of these slides from Jen, but what is Afterlee Ecovillage? It's it's an intentional ecovillage. Okay. Dogs and cats, that's a big question in ecovillages, yeah. And it's one okay. Yeah, dogs and cats, interesting. It's one of the big four, what I call it, on eco-villages and communities. So, yeah, what is Afterlee? It's an intentional community. And it was formed, why have we created Afterlee Ecovillage? What's the intention there? And it really is an intention of a whole lot of people. I helped create this because there was a whole lot of people coming to me and going, we want this, and there wasn't many opportunities around. And if there was, there were old communities with a set culture that people weren't that interested in joining. And also, the beauty of starting something is it makes it more affordable. As time goes on, it becomes less affordable with all things. So there was a whole lot of intentions around Afterlee, but the main intention is that there's a whole bunch of people that want to try and want to go further in this journey of what is living in community and living on land, and that's basically the intention of it. So I should actually go to the vision here, but I didn't. I'll get to the vision later of what. So we'll get to the vision in terms of the intention there. But I'll quickly go as well. Like, why Afterlee? Like, out of all places, was Afterlee chosen? And there's a whole lot of reasons. Firstly, being a town planner, I've been involved in quite a lot of eco-village projects, and a lot of them fail on that basic thing is whatever they wanted couldn't happen. on the land from a legal point of view. So the first requirement is, let's find a piece of land where what we want to develop can actually work. And we are lucky enough to still have in New South Wales the land sharing policy in the planning scheme. And that came out due to the 1970s and the Aquarius Festival and all those communities that sprang from there. And luckily the government at the time said they had two pathways. It's like, do we kick everyone off those communities and just bulldoze them, or do we legislate for them and create some kind of policy to allow these communities? And that's how the land sharing policy was born. And it's been whittled away quite substantially, but it still exists. And it exists out here in Kyogle and a number of other places. And so straight away, yes, let's use this one. And that means we can do what we want to do legally. If you try to create an eco-village in some other places where that wasn't possible, it's not saying it's not impossible, but you're looking at 5 years of just planning, and also a lot of logistics, whereas this was a smoother process that could happen relatively quickly. So that was the first criteria. And with that is, the size of land dictates how many houses you can have with the policy. So we wanted to create a village, not just another land sharing community of like 10 or 12 families. And that came about because firstly, it creates affordability, but secondly, it creates a village. And I've seen the most successful eco-villages are the larger ones. And that's generally because if there's issues with, everyone comes with their history, let's put it that way. Everyone's got history. And on a larger eco-village, people's histories don't matter as much. Let's put it that way. And that way, even if there is issues, personal dynamics, relationship issues, because the community is so large, it can often handle those things. On a smaller community, it can be much more difficult to navigate those things. So from that point of view, a larger village, but there's a whole lot of other reasons. The larger, as I said, affordability, but also you can allow to then experiment as well and innovate and have a lot more scope, if you want to call it, in a larger community. And I live on a community myself, and we are on 100 acres, and there's only 12 of us families, and that's hard to manage. So, the more people, the easier it is to manage the land as well. So, we chose Afterlee for a couple. There's already a couple there. It was in, land sharing policy applies, and the size of the land allowed enough houses to create a village. And you can't get 700 acres, if you go closer to the coast. It had water, soil, good access. It has 2 sealed access roads. People go, oh, why don't you buy this land adjoining the World Heritage Rainforest, but you have to drive a 4-wheel drive track up there to get there, and that's like for fire reasons and a whole lot of other reasons, it's not a good idea. And what I see the eco-village movement as well is that if you buy, degraded land in one way, you can enhance it. But if you buy pristine rainforest, you're going to destroy it to live there. So in one way, it's part of the regenerative movement is to buy land that you can regenerate. But the other bonus of this site, of course, was the school, and the fact it was a site of an old town. And what better place to create a village than where there was a village, And so that was the extra bonus. It was one of only 2 schools in New South Wales where the Department of Education didn't own the land. So we ended up also owning the school at the same time when buying the land. And the Department of Education did take a few buildings before we could. But yeah, they handed us the keys. They were very generous in the end and handed us the keys and gave it, to us. So, that was another bonus of the site. There's very few sites, that have that kind of, I guess, ready-made village ready to start. So yeah, there's a whole lot of reasons why Afterlee. So if anyone, if you're wondering, hopefully that's answered your questions. Yeah, so it has these aspects as well. It does have 200 acres of cleared land. We're going to be using, of course, some of that for the home sites, but there is going to be a substantial amount of land left for agriculture. And one of the important elements the group of people felt is we want to be able to grow our own food. So it does have that ability. It has the forests. It has a lot of forest. And so that's something that I think will be the ongoing thing with the community of what to do with so much forest resource. As Banya said, there's already areas we want to conserve, but there is areas that we may want to also utilize, and how do we utilize that in a regenerative way? Unfortunately, they're very degraded. It's really sad to see. I'm an old forest activist, so it's like Australia walked around the site and there's actually not one old growth tree left on the site, which is pretty sad. So it's a long journey, but down the road, I think there's I've forgotten the landowner's name, but he has an example of what that area can be like when it's restored. And it has abundance of water. This area, I didn't realize how abundant it was in water. Springs everywhere, creek, dams. We've got a huge dam, which currently supplies a number of residents with their water supply as well. So yeah, it's like we don't have to worry about water. Which, in a climate change scenario, it's drought proof, And as I was talking about, it's got the current infrastructure, The RFS leases off us as well. And we're hoping, we'll talk about it in the future, but, for some more infrastructure as well. But it's got some infrastructure there. So, when we came together, as Banya put it, I like to call this project, it's a community-informed design. So it was informed by the community, but in the end it was myself and a few others that have some of that professional knowledge that can sort of funnel that into, that's not possible due to fire regulations, rather than, spending 10 years going around and round. So really what we're doing is fast tracking a process that generally some communities take 5 to 10 years, so we're really going. It might seem slow for the members, but we're actually going at a pretty fast rate in terms of development. So we designed different zones, and you can see like the yellow is all the agricultural land. And there was talk about that, this being more the conservation areas because they're further away and we probably won't ever use them. And then maybe here we use firewood and as Banya's saying, look at different ways we can use the resources. And we were planning some houses here, but due to fire, we just decided it was too expensive and too risky, so it was taken away from there. So we've gone through a whole design process with the community, and as Banya said, we also. There was also, do we have the village here or here? And so the members helped feedback on some of this design. And so that's a little bit more of a, this is going to be our community village hub where we're going to have smaller village area and some of the more community facilities in that area. And the rural industry nearby as well, and then it's close to the school and things like that as well. So creating quite a variety of lots. How does this all work in terms of like the community? I guess we have to have an entity of some kind, and the cooperative, it's a cooperative called the Healthy Living Community Cooperative, and it was called that because when we developed the cooperative, we hadn't found the land yet. So that was just a general name that we created for the cooperative. And cooperatives are really awesome. In my journey with this cooperative, it's the first cooperative I helped create, and I'm like a big fan of them now. They are a bit, not as a bit cumbersome at times in terms of, compared to a company or something like that. But for this purpose, as an eco-village, they're perfect. And Tunnable, some of the larger eco-villages that do exist in Australia are also cooperatives. And so it's really nice that there is other cooperatives we can reach out to. What did you guys do here? So we're not alone in terms of being a large residential cooperative. So, as a cooperative, it owns the land, and so members are shareholders in the cooperative which own the land. And that was one of the other things. It was straight away owned by the community. So the land was straight away, people putting money in, you're actually buying the land. So it's not like it's a low risk scenario, if that makes sense. But if you want to go further into how a cooperative works, you can, and that's how the community operates from a legal perspective, which includes a board. So I guess the difference as well in, sometimes I feel like my community is only 12 shareholders, but it's not a cooperative. And I feel like this one runs smoother because we have a board making the day-to-day decisions. And so as a member, if you don't want to be going to meetings constantly, because community often means lots of meetings, you don't have to. You can let the board, they can meet and decide those day-to-day things. And they get voted in, so they're representatives of all of the members. So I've been asked this question, like, what makes Afterlee different to, say, other MOs, that have existed for 20, 30 years in the area? And there's a few things that make it different. Its size is one, of course. There's only about 6 other communities in Australia of this size. So it's one of the top 10, Afterlee is about in the top 10 of, in terms of size of eco-villages in Australia. So that straight away makes it quite unique to other MOs. So that in itself creates, as I said, a whole lot of opportunities. Second, it's planned village layout. There's not many MOs I'm aware of rural MOs that actually have a village with smaller house sites and a sort of planned village for, residents that may not want a whole acre to manage, or for some reason just want to live closer to other people or whatever. So it's unique in that way. 3, the professional assistants. So myself and others coming in that have this wealth of knowledge, have tried to do these things before, coming in and helping guide the members. And as I said, that saves years of time and frustration. So that's another difference. A lot of MOs in the 70s and 80s came together, a bunch of friends or a group, and they didn't know what they were doing. And it's been 20 years of like trying to find that out and going, why didn't we have someone just on board straight away that said this was a bad idea, So that's already very different to other MOs. And also, we are planning a lot of community infrastructure. So that's something different to other MOs as well. A lot of MOs, there's your 5 acres, you're on your own kind of thing, whereas we are looking at quite a lot of planned community infrastructure that the co-op will manage and own. So does bring in a bit more complication, but also brings in a whole lot more community aspect to this project than a normal land sharing community. So that's just 4 differences, point of differences of what, how this is different to another MO. And with that, some of the planned community infrastructure includes a microgrid. So we're looking at a microgrid for half the houses, and that's been a big decision by the community recently, because it's such a big cost to the co-op. It's like it was actually ended up being a decision by the community rather than the board. So microgrid, rather than straight away, we always had the intention to be off-grid. We didn't want to connect to the normal power. There's a whole lot of reasons around that, sustainability being one, but also a whole lot of other reasons. But a microgrid, what allows that is that the people on the microgrid are interconnected. And so people on the microgrid won't need their own batteries and solar panels. There will be a community batteries and solar panels, which will power up to 29 homes, and also all the community infrastructure. And in that way, people have cheaper cost because you're looking to 20. If you want a good system to run normal household, you're looking at 20 to 30K. So you don't have that upfront cost. We are, however, introducing a little bit of a cost because it is such a big cost, but no way as big. So that's a microgrid, which is, I think, I may be corrected on this, we may be the first in Australia to have a residential off-grid microgrid. Most microgrids are connected to the grid somehow. So that's already an innovation that Afterlee will have that possibly is one of the first. We're looking at a community multi-purpose hall, a given, a community needs that to have meetings, parties, dances, whatever. We're looking at, of course, the school. There's a group formed to look at reopening the school and what that looks like. Nursery. We've also got some central wastewater facilities around the village. So also you don't need your own septic. You'll be connected to a central wastewater. So this will be a lot of saving costs for initial people developing in those things. I guess, but there will be an ongoing service fee, if that makes sense, for those things. And we're looking at a future cafe down the track, 5-10 years when the village is built. That's probably a time to think about a cafe out there. Food production areas. And we're looking at a natural swimming pool, or how can we create a really nice swimming environment for members out there, whether that be using the natural lake and fixing that up, or a natural swimming pool of some kind, because it gets hot in summer here and everyone wants to have a swim, and we want to make a really nice environment for that, and it becomes a bit of a hub as well for the community. So, and let's have a spa and sauna while we're at it, kind of thing, So yeah, some of the community infrastructure we're looking at. That's the planned microgrid, talking about sort of the microgrid will service these areas here. And we're looking at stage. So the first one we'll have a battery and whatever for 10 homes. And then once they're built, we do another for 10 homes. And so it's like, so the upfront costs are lowered a little bit. Yeah. So I talked a bit about this participatory design, and that's what Jen talks about, what an eco-village needs to involve the members in its design. And as I said, we've done that, for quite a few things in the design of the eco-village. We had what's called the forest cluster that got removed. That was a decision by the community. Placement of the village, as I said, the microgrid. Bunya's been working with the members on a big permaculture plan of like, what does the village look like from a permaculture perspective, food crops, things like that. And there's ongoing decisions that the members are involved in the design of the eco-village. So our current vision, is I can read it out. At Afterlee Ecovillage, we envision a pioneering community comprising 60 home sites nestled within village clusters. Our goal is to establish an Australian eco-village renowned for its innovative practices, principles and governance. Guided by autonomy, trust and shared responsibility, we foster a culture of continuous learning, transparency and mutual respect. Central to our vision is implementation of regenerative permaculture and successional agroforestry, serving as the backbone of our farming practices. Through education, entrepreneurship and cultural exchange, we aim to empower residents to become stewards of the land while promoting ecological resilience and social cohesion. Together we strive to create an inclusive, multi-generational village that embodies creativity, community spirit, positive change, both locally and globally. So, how have these values so far made it into the eco-village, and where we are at the moment? And innovation, as I said, the off-grid is one of them. The village area, that's a really innovative aspect. And the way the eco-village has developed so far has been an innovative process. Continuous learning, part of the members have had huge opportunities to learn the last couple of years. As part of the participatory process for the DA, we ran a series of workshops for all the members, looking at eco-village design, getting feedback, which helped inform the planning of the eco-village. And then they've just also had, a year-long course with Banya around the land and permaculture. So already the members have had a huge opportunity to learn at being part of this process. Regenerative permaculture, of course, that's a principle in the community and it's going to be implemented in the governance. So as part of that learning, we're learning about different forms of governance, conflict resolution, how do we make decisions together, and we, trying different things as well. So members have been exposed to a few different ways of conflict resolution, decision making. So it's, I guess if everything's on the table in terms of someone's got a really good idea of this is maybe a good way to resolve this, it's a perfect opportunity to try it out. Multi-generational, we have a whole range of ages. Entrepreneurship, so one of the community infrastructure spaces we want to make straight up is like a big maker's space, so people can craft or woodwork or whatever, a big shared maker space that members can really get stuck into doing stuff in. That's one of the few things, but ongoing, the co-op does want to support anyone that wants to have a business, like what Banya was saying. If it's agricultural, there's some land there to lease if you want it. We'll encourage you, And stewards of the land, regenerating the waterways, protecting the environmental values is a big part of the process as well. So coming to where we are at now. So it's been a 2-year journey to where we are at. We've got approval now. So council's given us approval. And so we're on to this next stage of building. And it's an exciting stage. Within this year, we're going to have the roads built and some of this infrastructure started going in. And hopefully, by the end of the year, maybe the first house being built. So that's where we're hoping to be. And so it was always structured that this project would have these different stages. So the first stage, basically the members came in, but we had no approval yet. So there was a bit of risk because it was we're still seeking approval. So for that reason, it was a little bit cheaper. And that helped buy the land and all the DA costs and management costs in that. So this next phase we're now offering is to now we need to fund all the infrastructure, the roads and all that community infrastructure. So so there's an offering now where at the moment it's about 15 shares we're putting out there, and we are inviting people to come in on this journey and be part of this community. And we already have 4 applications just from the first site tour. And yeah, there would be, we've got approval for over 60 sites, so there's an opportunity for another 15 as well. So the idea is eventually all the people's shares will pay for all this beautiful community infrastructure that all of you will be able to enjoy. So you're not just buying a home site, you're also buying into a whole ecosystem, if you want to call it, of a community. So yeah, what's included when you buy a share in the Afterlee Co-op? Well, firstly, of course, you get your own private home site. So we've divided the home sites into these village and larger home sites. So the village ones are over a quarter an acre, and the larger ones are over an acre. At least an acre, but some of them are much larger. So that's the first thing, of course. As being a shareholder, you have the right to your own home site to build on. And then you also belong to a cooperative. So straight away, you're part of a community of six, it's going to be up to 60 shareholders. That doesn't mean 60 people. That actually means more like 120 people, possibly. So you're straight away in a community of support of that many people. You, as a shareholder, can put proposals, I want to build this amazing thing I've been thinking of all my life. Now I'm in this community, I have the opportunity to do it. Put it to the community, So you'll have that opportunity as a shareholder to put these proposals up. And you have a role in the co-op, so you can also be, apply to be a board member or a secretary or whatever, so you can actually participate in the actual goings-on of the co-op. I've written that down. Yeah, I also have access to all the land, of course. So, as part of that, there's the 700 acres. And you can use some of that land for your own private use. So you might want to start your own orchard or whatever, but you want to start it as your enterprise, you can lease it privately from the co-op. And you also get to vote on the important issues. And, we are looking at options in the future of possible, how can we make this even more affordable? And so we've got some working groups on that at the moment, and we haven't got anything to show yet because it takes quite a lot of time and research. But we're looking at how can we allow people to even, come in and pay off their share, or how can we work out things that makes it even more affordable, and especially around the building element as well, because the building element is a big journey, and how can we really help members on that journey? Because it can be, some people love it, but some people it's like, I don't want to think about it. So why join? I guess as I was talking about before, to be something bigger, part of something bigger. When you join, you're actually joining a movement, a worldwide movement of communities. And often people say, living in communities is sometimes really hard. But the reason why it's hard is, I put in there, to develop yourself in ways not possible without community. The reason it's hard is because it pushes you a little bit to grow and develop. So it's not for everyone. Community is not for everyone, but it's for those people that want to grow and develop. So for me, it's about that evolution. How much do I want to grow and develop? And you can do it at your own pace, but it will certainly make you develop and grow, being on a community. But you'll be healthier as part of it. Some people I know have left communities, even they go, it's so hard. They actually, when they leave, they're like, that was so good, And often when you're in it, sometimes people don't realize how good it is. Like my kids are growing up in a community, they have no idea how good they've got it. So yeah, it's it's certainly a journey, but for those people that are into developing and growing in more than themselves, but also in the world, it's joining a community is definitely going to do that. And it's also a way that you can own 700 acres but not be responsible for all of it, you know? So you can enjoy that 700 acres, but you're not the only person and all that responsibility to manage it. And it's getting harder. If you want to truly regenerate land, you need all the people. You can't do it yourself. And you're part of the solution. And if you enjoy healthy food, healthy way of living, this is probably the best thing you can do, you know, because you'll have people around you inspiring you to also be part of that. So, yeah, I wouldn't say it's for everyone, but you'd be surprised. There's someone in my community that his partner, you know, dragged him in, and he's like, oh. But now he just can't think of anything else. You know, he didn't realize what it would actually bring. And it's so funny when I see my community members on the street, down the street, it's like, you're not family and you're not friends, you're somewhere in between, you know, and it's a unique relationship that you won't have in any other situation. But we know, you know you're all in it together, so at the end of the day, you've got each other's back. Yeah, and it's pretty exciting. I mean, I don't know if the members can say, but it's pretty exciting being part of something like this. Yeah. What's the process? There we go, I've got more slides. So if you want to join, the first thing we've said is site visit. So we don't want people to join and not even been out there. You know, oh no, what have I bought into? So our first requirement is to go out on a site visit. It's not every second Saturday, I got that wrong, it's once a month. Sorry, it is every second Saturday of the month. So, so there's one next Saturday. So register online, come out to the site, have a walk around, meet some of the members if they're there. We're trying to coincide them with working bees, so some of the members are also on site, so you get to meet them. Once you've been out there and you go, yep, you apply for it. And you submit an application and the board will consider your application, and often that might include an interview. We ask people videos, that helps maybe even streamline that. But we want to, you know, the members want to know who's coming into our greater community, you know, so they want to get to know you a bit more. And then you pay an application fee, and it's just been decided that what we'll do is you pay half of the application fee, and then if you're successful, you pay the other half. And that's because it does take a bit of time for the board to consider your application. So, you know, it can take hours of a group of people to consider your application, and so there's a bit of cost involved in that. And then once you've been accepted, we'll ask for payment of the share. So I think we've got 60 or 90 days or so, you know, so to pay it. And then you're a member, a bona fide member, and you get to choose your home site. So at the moment we're pegging out all the home sites, so hopefully by the time you join you can walk around and go, oh, that one's been taken, but I'll take that one. And the way we've been doing it is first in, first served, because it's very hard to work out the order of, you know, who gets what. And so we've been working out this sort of thing of like, so the sooner you're in, the better choice of sites you've got. So unfortunately for that 60th member, they're going to have not much choice of sites. But we have planned that every site is pretty good. So, you know, you're not going to get a bum site. Because there is no bum sites, hopefully. Yeah, and that's really it. I didn't put the Facebook. We've got a website, of course. That's the best. We've got a Facebook as well. And I don't know, I think we're running out of time, so we won't go to the video. So that's it.
Thanks, James.